Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are going to be talking about homelessness and domestic violence with the CEO and president of Shelter House, which operates three homes for families here in Fairfax County. So welcome, Joe Meyer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk a little bit about the issues, not just what Shelter House does.
Sure.
But I want to talk a little bit about the issues, and let's start by talking about how you came to be in this line of work. I know you started out with Cornerstones.
Yes, rest in their faith back in the day.
Back in the day, right?
But Cornerstones, yes, I started as a case manager. Actually moved down from Western Pennsylvania, where I went to school, and always knew I wanted to work with people. And I had the opportunity down here to move down and start working where I never thought I would work with homeless individuals or families. And it was at the Embry Rucker shelter where I started, and it really opened my eyes to what it really takes to make people tick. So as here I was in my young 20s, working with people who are homeless, facing issues that I've never faced my entire life. And it was then that I was just given opportunities to be in leadership roles, and I moved to Shelter House about 13 years ago, and have helped to grow this organization, where we were a very small organization running one shelter in Falls Church for families. And in 2007, we opened up the Catherine K. Hanley Family Shelter in Fairfax. And that's when Shelter House really started to become a little bit more visible and become a leader in addressing family homelessness.
Yeah, and I think what people need to understand is that a lot of that homelessness is invisible to us. And a lot of times we will think that we don't know any homeless people, when in fact we do, because a lot of homeless people have jobs.
Yeah.
So kind of explain to us, we might run into people who have all kinds of jobs, who, for whatever reason, explain some of the paths how people end up homeless as a family.
Sure, absolutely. There's no typical homeless family or homeless person. Everyone comes in with a lot of different issues. We at Shelter House, we don't necessarily work or see the stereotypical homeless as when you are talking about somebody that you see in the city that may be on a park bench, or maybe walking around that may be delusional, or we always hear about alcohol and drug issues with the homeless, and we don't necessarily see that type of individual or family come into our shelters. There are those individuals out there, of course, but as you mentioned, about 60-65% of the people that we see coming in, adults that we see coming in, are working.
Right.
And a lot of times full-time employment. And especially during holidays, where there's the seasonal work, where people are looking to, businesses, retail are looking to hire. When you're checking out with your Christmas presents, a lot of the individuals are there for seasonal work that are living in our shelters temporarily. I'll even go back a step further, and there's so many times that in our schools, our children, which is about 70% of the population that we serve, are in Fairfax County Public Schools, sitting in the same classrooms as our children. One story that really resonates with me is a high school student who went to Centerville High School, who played football, a star football player, and the Washington Post actually covered this. And his friend's mother would pick him up and from practice and bring him back to the neighborhood of the shelter, of the Catherine Hanley shelter where he was staying. But he always asked her if he can drop him off at a specific house.
Right.
That went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. The mother of the friend never knew that this individual was homeless.
And isn't that stressful in itself when kids feel like they have to hide this?
Yeah.
And I will go back and talk too about how culturally we like to believe that if people are homeless or struggling or out of work, that it's a character flaw. It's not situational. You're not trying hard enough. You did something wrong. You made bad choices. That's not the case. And I think in order to really connect with people and to help people in our community, we have to step away from blaming people from their own situation. And to me, where children are concerned, that's a great example of how he did not want to be judged for being homeless, or to have people think less of him as an individual because of the circumstances that he was in.
Right. We give tours of our shelters all the time, and I welcome any of the viewers or listeners to come into our shelters. We have open doors. You can schedule a time to really see what we do, how we operate, but also just to engage and see the families that we're serving. And every time we bring a tour in, everyone's amazed by the children that are in our shelters. So many of our children really the age range from newborn the whole way up to teenagers, but we typically, the majority are between 5 and 12. And people that come in a tour are just amazed how upbeat the children are. So many of our children don't even know the situations that they're in, and the volunteers really like to engage with them. And my point to them is, we need to reach these children. Because as you turn around and you see the parents that are in these life skills groups doing computer and literacy skills and looking for jobs and looking for housing, and society's really down on the adults. As you said, the blame game of accusing them or blaming them for the situation that they're in. You turn to those children and you look at those children, those adults, a lot of the times were those children 20 years ago. I've been doing this for 17 years, and I have already seen children come through the shelter when I first started, and now they're coming back through with their children. And it's about giving them a chance. It's about breaking that cycle. I know we say break the cycle so many times, but it really is true about breaking that cycle, reaching the children, teaching them and giving them the tools and equipment that they need in order to do better. Because right now the parents are under so much stress.
I know. So
much stress. They have full-time jobs, but they also have children. They also have to get the children to and from school. The children sometimes, fortunately, have after-school activities, if they're fortunate enough to have them. And they are trying to parent just like every other parent out in our community, with the added stress of not having a roof over their head. And now those children are at a disadvantage automatically, because the parents are under so much stress that they are now removed, and they're not able to be dependent on their parent as I was growing up. And sometimes I still am. But that dependence on your parent, and if they're not there in order to help you and guide you, you're at a disadvantage. You're already going to follow
it is really hard.
That path.
It's really hard. So, I have 3 kids, and I was a single mom for a long time. But I always felt like my kids always trusted me that no matter where we went or what happened, that I would take care of everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're in their 20s and late 20s and 30s now. But it's kind of like my kids always trusted that no matter what happened, that I would take care of them. And I was fortunate that I was always able to take care of my children. Yeah. I can't imagine, but I can empathize with the fact that you're a parent and your kids are looking for you to make it all right, to make them safe, to make sure they've got enough to eat and that they can get to school, and how devastating it would be as a parent to realize you can't do it without help. And I think we really need to make it easier for people to find help, to get them back on the path. Of course, everybody wants to be self-sufficient. People don't choose to be in the situation they're in. Right. If there was another choice, they'd have done the choice.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about Housing First and how some folks are focused on how to solve that problem of getting people back into self-sufficiency by focusing on Housing First.
Sure.
Explain that movement.
Sure. So I would say 10 years ago, as we were running traditional homeless shelters, we would focus on getting the family into shelter, stabilizing them in the shelter, work with them on parenting skills and employment skills, a lot of different skills that would help them become self-sufficient. That takes a very long time, especially when a family has faced poverty almost their entire life, sometimes faced homelessness for many, many years. It would sometimes take months and months and months in order to stabilize that family in the shelter and make them housing ready. And what we say now is everyone coming through our door needs housing. So we're going to focus on housing first. That's what we want to do. We're not going to focus on the parenting. We're not going to focus on
workforce development skills, or all
Correct.
the things that people need.
Correct. And we were seeing also, as families stayed in the shelter longer, they would decompensate because they don't want to stay in an institution. They want to be in their own housing. So our focus is break down that housing barrier, whatever that housing barrier was or is. We're going to break that down. We're going to get them back into housing, and sometimes we're going to pay for them to get back into housing, which is much cheaper than holding them in the shelter.
It is, and people don't realize that, Joe.
And once we get them into housing, now that work begins to help to stabilize. So when we say housing first, that's really what it is. Focus on that housing, get them into housing, provide them with some rental support for, again, it's case by case depending on what the need is and what the barriers for the family is. Work with the entire family to stabilize and then provide those self-sufficiency skills and trainings that they need while they're in housing.
And so does that mean collaborating with transitional housing, or how do you move them from the shelter to the next step?
There are different models. One is transitional housing, and transitional housing isn't necessarily part of the housing first model. It's a in-between step, and it's for, again, it's not housing first, and rapid rehousing isn't for every single family. But what our goal is from the shelter, get them directly into that housing. What we need to do is we're partnering with landlords all over Fairfax County, all over the state sometimes, in order to get these families in order to lower the rent, in order to take a risk. We also know landlords are taking a risk by serving some of our families. Some of our families come with evictions. Some of our families come with different housing barriers that made them become homeless. So we are there for the landlord to, one, help them understand the population that we're serving, but also have the landlord be able to work with us. So they're not just working with that tenant. If they have a problem with the tenant, contact Shelter House, talk to us. We can help to mitigate the issue. And if it becomes that the family can no longer stay there, we can help transition that family on from that unit and possibly get another family in. So it's constantly building relationships with those landlords.
And that has to be a benefit for the landlord too, because if you can get somebody in an apartment that they can afford, or they can get a better job that eventually over the long term they can afford, it's a win-win. It's a win-win for the landlord, and it certainly is for the family.
Yeah.
So when we come back from our break, we're going to delve a little bit more into this issue of how we get people into housing, the resources that are available here in Fairfax County, and how, we can all look differently at who the homeless families are right here in our community. Join us after the break.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation.
You're resigning.
Why? You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit. Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bagging lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again your host.
Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we're talking with Joe Meyer, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Shelter House. Thank you for being here, Joe.
Thank you.
So when we went on break, we were talking about how you work with landlords to help some of the people who are in your shelters to find stabilized, permanent housing, really. But Greg from Falls Church called in and he asked, well, how do you find these landlords? I mean, the Fairfax County is a big county. And obviously, I'm assuming people want to live close to where they work. So how in the world do you cultivate these relationships?
Not only is Fairfax County a big county, but it's a very expensive county. So we understand that the families that are coming out of our shelters are not going to be able to afford the fair market rent here in this county, which is sometimes $1,700, $1,800, $2,000 a month rent. So what we have done is we have implemented and hired specialized positions within our organization that work specifically with landlords. We have a housing locator network that is part of the Partnership to Prevent and End Homelessness within Fairfax County, and our housing locators are part of that network. So if landlords want to get involved, want to be part of the solution to ending homelessness, they can look up on the Fairfax County government page, fairfaxcounty.gov/homelessness, and look up housing location or housing locator network and tap into that network. They can leave their information, and then one of our housing locators will be sure to give that person a call. Even just inquiries, if they are just interested, they don't have to have a commitment to rent something out, but if they just want to learn a little bit more about it, we'll be happy. Our housing locators, we have one at each shelter. We have one at our Falls Church shelter, one at our Centerville shelter, and at our domestic violence shelter, which is a new position there too, because housing is also critical to house victims of domestic violence. They all work very, very closely with these landlords, not just to get families into housing, but help to stabilize those.
To support them. It's a relationship. Clearly, it's a trust-based relationship that everybody's going to hold up their end. If there's a problem, you're going to help, and everybody's going to work together for the benefit of the family, including the family. I mean, to me, that's solid reasoning. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Dean Klein and the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, which is an agency in Fairfax County. They have a 10-year plan to end homelessness. I don't exactly know where we are with that, but I know Dean, and I know that he works with a lot of nonprofits to end homelessness in the county.
Yeah, so I think there are around 20 or a little over 20 organizations within Fairfax County that are part of the Partnership to Prevent and End Homelessness. And Dean Klein is the director of the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, which is a county department. And we are very fortunate here in Fairfax County to have an office, a government office, that is dedicated to homelessness, to prevent and end homelessness. So our relationship with them is really a partnership. Yes, they hold a contract for us as a nonprofit to operate the Catherine Hanley Shelter and also our Patrick Henry Shelter in Falls Church. So it's a contractual relationship where the county provides us the majority of our budget to operate these shelters. But we really look at it, and so does Dean Shop, really look at it as a partnership where we're making decisions together on what the best way to serve the homeless population is, and along with the entire partnership of the other organizations that are part of this. You mentioned the 10-year plan. The 10-year plan was adopted in 2008. So, as we know,
ooh, wow! I guess that means ding, ding, ding. We're here.
It's 2018, and I am glad to say that we have reduced homelessness by 50% here in Fairfax County since 2008. So you may be asking, or someone may be asking, what about the other 50%? And we have a lot more work to do here in the county. We have still almost 1,000 people who are homeless on any given night here in Fairfax County. Again, they may not be visible, but they are there. And over half of them, as I mentioned before, are children that are facing homelessness. So we still have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more work to do around advocacy. We have a lot more work to do around education and awareness of our community. And we certainly have a lot more work to do in affordable housing in this county.
Oh, one of my favorite subjects is affordable housing. And you're right, that is one of the key, and that's why nonprofits are starting to do more advocacy around the things that impact their ability to help people get where they need to be, which is self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I know that the Board of Supervisors is doing their best to look at different ways to address affordable housing. I think developers probably need to look differently. There was an article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch this weekend about a pair of sisters who are taking an abandoned office building and they're going to put 29 apartments in it, but they're using an incentive that's never been used before by the city of Richmond to put affordable housing units in there. And I'm thinking, well, woohoo. So somebody recognized, hey, it works for us and it works for the city of Richmond. But the idea of converting existing buildings like office buildings, because inherently you can't really build affordable housing because the nature of new construction means it's really gentrification. So you have to take existing structures, rehab, renovate, you know, and put them on the market so that they are more affordable. And I don't know how quickly the county is addressing that, but from where you are sitting, clearly that would be helpful if there were developers willing to do that.
Absolutely, and we are taking part as a nonprofit who is primary focus is on homelessness and domestic violence, and the service delivery of or to those individuals who are facing those issues. Affordable housing is extremely critical, and we are sitting on different county and different community committees and councils in order to address that. So there's work being done. I don't want people to think that there's no work being done around affordable housing. There is work, and that's one of the things as we are coming to the end of this 10 years of our plan. We also recognize that affordable housing hasn't necessarily been addressed in the way that we needed. So here we are as homeless service providers really stepping into that to really voice how critical it is to make sure, yes, that we have workforce development or workforce housing and things like that, but also affordable housing to me means housing for the homeless. Affordable housing to somebody else may mean housing for
teachers, firefighters,
exactly.
You know, people graduating from college.
Exactly.
I've got three kids trying to figure out how to make, you know, how to live in a house in an expensive place.
Right, and all of that is needed.
Yeah.
All of it is needed. But I also, you know, want to make sure that we are focused on those individuals who are at the most vulnerable in our community, and those are the people who are tonight are sleeping outside in our woods, tonight who are sleeping with their children in their cars.
Right. And so going forward, do you see, you know, you're managing 2 homeless shelters plus the domestic violence shelter. Given the need, do you see expanding that in any way, either capacity for the 2 that you have or putting one in a different location?
My opinion is that we should be done building and creating more beds for homeless individuals and victims of domestic violence in the county. What we need to focus on is housing. There's absolutely no reason why, and we as Shelter House have been successful in getting people into housing and then providing the services in the housing. We have enough beds in our county right now to service all of the homeless families and the individuals that we have. If we put our focus and our resources into housing, we can end this issue of homelessness and domestic violence.
That's fantastic. So you really see yourself as more of a gateway. Yeah. You know, this is how, you know, people come to you and they're there temporarily and you are the gateway to this housing network in the county.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And also helping landlords to see how this is a win-win for everybody. You know, I can imagine that there are a lot of people who never considered the fact that they could be part of your program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have you know, our breakfast is coming up, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But we have a lot of people in our crowd that come in as business people or just people that are aware of the issue, or they were invited or dragged to our breakfast by friends, and here they are as landlords and didn't even really think about, wow, I can be part of that solution. That's what our breakfast is, and you know, that's what we like to say. You know, our community, Shelter House is just part of the solution. The rest of our community, the county government, business leaders, small business, large business, the faith-based groups, they're all part of this solution. And we, as I said before, we can really end homelessness and domestic violence if we all come together and do what we need to do.
Talk a little bit about, you know, you do collaborate with other, so I sit on the board of Bright Paths. We do financial literacy and financial mentoring, but there are other programs. One of the ones that's new to me is the pajama program. Karen Duffy came and spoke at our Rotary Club, and they actually distribute brand new pajamas and books to children at the Kate Hanley homeless shelter, and she was talking about how excited these kids are to have a brand new pair of pajamas. They want to put them on right away, and they want to sit down and they want to read their books, and so it becomes this really wonderful event. And I know too, my Rotary Club has participated in throwing a birthday party at the Kate Hanley shelter. Like service organizations and clubs and faith groups can come in and do things like throw a birthday party once a month for these kids. So I'm looking at all the different ways in which other nonprofit organizations connect with your families.
Well, I will tell you, I'm sitting here smiling as you're talking about it because I'm visualizing these groups coming in, and so many times we get calls about how can we help you? How can we help the kids? How can we help the families? And we have a great conversation about what they can do, and you're talking about some of them, and with pajamas and birthday parties and movie nights, and we talk about all the ways that people and groups can help us. And it amazes me, as they walk in the door, they want to help. When they walk out the door, they feel like they got more out of it than the families that they just helped, because of just how fulfilling they are going out. So as you mentioned, we have other nonprofits that are helping us. We have Women Giving Back, which is another nonprofit that helps, that focuses on women and business suits and getting them ready for interviews and things like that, where our families and our women can go and shop for free at their warehouse and bring back some nice suits, prepare for interviews, housing interviews, job interviews, whatever it may be. We talked about the pajama program. The Sheriff's Department is another fantastic partnership.
Yes, I know.
With the Shop with the Sheriff.
Yes.
And Sheriff Stacey Kincaid is just amazing.
She's been such a huge supporter all along.
She's more than just a sheriff.
Yeah, she is more than just a sheriff.
And I tell her that all the time. She's everywhere. But just her deputy, she has 40-some deputies come out for a pizza party with the children right before school. The children show up at the courthouse, and then they all bus over together to Target, and each child gets $250 in gift cards that the deputy has, and they literally go shopping with the sheriff that day. And it is truly amazing. Here's another example of the kids just having dignity on that first day of school, because they all have brand new shoes, they all have nice clothes, they all have a new backpack. Sometimes that they've never had in their entire life, because they're always used to getting hand-me-downs and things like that, or donated goods or something from a neighbor. But here they are having brand new stuff, but they also have a brand new partner and sometimes a brand new perception of what authority is in our community, which are these sheriffs and police officers. It's just a win-win the entire way across with that particular program.
I agree with you, and I think on all counts, the sense of dignity, the sense of having a great relationship with law enforcement, and the fact that you show up to school looking like every other child and feeling like every other child. I don't think there's any substitute for that at all. When we come back from this break, we're going to be talking further with Joe Meyer, and this time we're going to be talking about domestic violence. So join us after the break.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfripp@aol.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read. and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Joining me tonight is Joe Meyer. He is the Executive Director and CEO of Shelter House. Thank you so much for being here, Joe.
Thanks for having me back.
Now, the thing we have not talked about, we've talked about your 2 family shelters, but you have Artemis House.
Right.
And Artemis House is specifically for domestic abuse survivors and their children, and it's at an undisclosed location.
Correct.
And so Jim from Chantilly kind of called in and asked when we were going to start talking about this other shelter, since we have not addressed domestic violence. Explain a little bit about why this shelter was set up the way it was, how it operates differently, and some of the specific needs of these particular families.
So as you mentioned, Artemis House is in an undisclosed location for obvious reasons. Our 2 other shelters, our addresses are on the website. If you need or if you know of somebody that needs help, you can send them right to our shelters, and the doors are there. But because domestic violence is such a critical issue around safety, and the people that are coming into Artemis House are literally in danger of their lives. We have people in our other shelters that have been abused or have been victims of domestic violence in the past, but they're not in imminent danger. And that's what makes this particular program so unique in our county and so needed, and the demand so high. We have county hotlines that people can call if they're in an abused relationship, or always call 911, and you will be connected to Artemis House if you're in an abusive relationship and you're trying to flee that. So that's probably the biggest difference. Everyone that's entering Artemis House, they don't have the other resources, or they don't have the safety with family or friends. But they need that safe house. They need to be in an undisclosed location so that we can provide that safety planning for them.
So let's talk about the reality of the fact that a woman is most likely to be killed in that moment when she is trying to leave the relationship, the house, the partner. It is the most dangerous time for her to try to leave. And so there have to be safeguards around making sure that she can't be found, but particularly the children. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about when someone leaves in their car with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and the children don't understand necessarily at first that they're not coming back there ever again, and especially for school-age children, trying to protect where the children are, because the abuser can easily try to track the partner through where the children are going to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this must be very, very difficult to manage.
It's very difficult to manage, but it's also it's carefully managed because of the safety. And you were absolutely right that the most dangerous part, or the most dangerous time for a victim is when they're trying to flee. So when they call, the first question that we ask them is, are you in a safe place that you can talk? If they say no, we ask them to hang up and call us back when they are, or find a place, because we know that if they get caught on the phone with us, with Artemis House, that could be very, very detrimental.
Event.
Yes.
Literally a triggering event.
So what we do is we safety plan with them immediately in case the abuser comes back in. We make sure that they, can hang up the phone, or that the phone number isn't visible, so that they don't know. We also make sure that we give them very, very, very important tips, such as if the abuser comes home, make sure you're not in the kitchen where all the kitchen utensils are, such as knives. Make sure you're not up in a bedroom where there's not an escape, and things like that. It's also very hard to bring up the children. It's extremely hard that the children are there in kind of the middle place, because sometimes the children don't see that what daddy is doing, or what boyfriend is doing, or what husband is doing is bad to mommy, because that's what they've grown up seeing. And it's extremely painful to see when mothers come in with children that the children are exhibiting some of those same behaviors as the abuser. So at Artemis House, we have trauma counseling, which is again a major difference between our homeless shelters and our domestic violence shelters, where we have hired a full-time individual to do trauma counseling with the adults. And then we also partner with another organization that provides trauma counseling to the children, because we understand that child witness to domestic violence is extremely important, that they understand that what is happening is wrong. And that's why the women that get out of these relationships, I find just so courageous, because it's extremely hard to get out of these situations because of the power and control that the abuser has over this person, whether it be financial, whether it be the house, whether it be the children, whether it be the pets, whether it be for religious reasons. There's so much power and control that abusers have over their victims that, you know, it's no wonder, honestly, it's no wonder why victims go back. And it's hard to see, but it's also understood also.
You know, it's interesting. Carole King, the singer-songwriter, in her biography talked about being in an abusive relationship. Yeah. And it was such a weird thing to be in the middle of her book. But one of the things that she put in there was abuse hotlines. But she said, don't ever judge anyone. Don't ever judge anyone for why they don't leave. Yeah. And I think that is hard for all of us to try to understand the mental things that you go through, but particularly when you have children, you know, because then it's not just your safety in your life, but it's trying to figure out how to keep them safe as well, because often children are used as weapons. So managing things like where they're working. Obviously, an abuser would know where this woman is employed, managing that, knowing where the children go to school and managing that. You know, this must be kind of a longer process for trying to heal the family before you can even get them into independent housing. So
our main focus is at crisis intervention right off the bat, is making sure that they're in a safe place, making sure that the children are in a safe place. As our other shelters, we focus on housing right away. Here we focus on making sure that we stabilize them mentally. The average length of stay still isn't that long. It's right around 65 days for the people that are coming into our domestic violence shelter. But we have to do a lot of work around that. One of the first things we do is looking at protective orders. That document is extremely important because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of people coming in that are employed and they have jobs, and the abuser knows where that victim works. They also know where the children go to school. So we partner again with Fairfax County Public Schools to make sure that our home school where Artemis House is located, that they are aware of the children that are coming from our shelter.
That's another one of those trusted partnerships and relationships that are necessary to make any of this work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they are tremendous. That school is tremendous with the communication to and from our staff at Artemis House to make sure that whoever's supposed to be picking the child up is supposed to be picking the child up. And just working with staff. But there are a lot of, we can have an entire segment on domestic violence just because of how important what we think of as the small details as far as safety planning and making sure that you're not taking the same route to work every single day and making sure that your employer knows. I mean, it's extremely difficult. Imagine putting yourself in that position where you have to go to your employer and tell them that I'm in a dangerous situation, and the employer say, okay, we'll help protect you, or is the employer going to be like, okay, now you're putting everyone in danger?
Right.
It's an extremely tough situation. We also see so many women become silent, and that's why it's important for us to be a voice for these women who are coming in to our shelter, because they are silenced. They're silenced by fear. They're silenced by embarrassment. So we have to speak up for them. We have to raise awareness for them of talking about the issues of why they're silent, why they don't want to turn to family members sometimes because they don't want to be seen as weak, or they don't want to be seen as imperfect, or things like that.
You know, it has to be tough, and yet one of the ways in which people can help coworkers or neighbors or other people that they feel might be in danger is to know to send them to you, right? Like there's a number that you can call. And so a lot of times people might suspect that something's going on and someone's reluctant to talk about it. And it seems to me one of the best ways that you can help people is to say, well, you know, here's a number. If you need help or assistance in any way, you know, because a lot of times people won't talk to their coworkers or their families or their neighbors. But there's signs that all of us should be looking out for.
Sometimes people won't talk at all. So I'll even go a step beyond that. Is so many times, you know, we can provide somebody a number, but if they're not going to talk to me, they're not, or they're not going to talk to you, they're not going to talk to a complete stranger either. So what I would suggest is, if you see signs of abuse, you pick up the phone, you call us. You may not be the one in an abusive relationship, but we have information for you. We have experts on the phone right now, if you call, that you can get a better understanding of what you can do. We can't force anyone to go through our program. You can't force anyone just to call us for information, but you can. If you just want more information of how can I help this individual, what else can I do? Again, not everyone's going to be eligible to come into our shelter, right. Because we have limited space around the county for victims of domestic violence. That sometimes we have to refer to other resources. It's the people who are in imminent danger that are literally fleeing for their life. That we have to admit into our shelter. But everyone else, if you feel like you're in an abusive relationship and you just need information, don't be hesitant to call and think you have to come into shelter. Call us to get information of what other resources are out there.
Right, but yes, because there are other resources in the county.
Yes.
You are one of a menu of resources in the county, but I think we can't overstate enough how much this is. If you think homelessness is invisible, women who are suffering and children who are in abusive homes, it is devastating and it's very difficult to detect and to offer help in a way that's helpful.
Yeah, homelessness is invisible to a point, but we also see homelessness out on our streets.
Right.
Domestic violence is within the four walls of families, and it affects everybody. Homelessness affects those who are in poverty. Domestic violence doesn't. Domestic violence has no economic status whatsoever. One of the statistics is 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And before I heard that, and I was like, okay, I know 4 women and they're not. Since I've been doing this and since I've been talking to people, that is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. As you're talking to people about this issue, as you're talking to loved ones about this and really find what their backstory is, it is absolutely a true stat. And then you're looking at the children who are also victims, even though they may not be physically abused, they are witnessing it, and they become victims.
And you make an important point, and I will just connect it to the Me Too movement and how many people didn't understand how many women had been sexually harassed and abused, and it's because we don't talk about it.
That's right.
So we're going to come back after this break. We're going to be talking with Joe Meyer of Shelter House and how you can get involved.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home? When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Inside Scoop, I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Joining me tonight is Joe Meyer, the Executive Director and CEO of Shelter House. So here in our final segment, Joe, let's talk about your big annual breakfast. Is this the 5th year?
This is the 5th year.
Fifth year of doing this breakfast. It's already sold out. It's going to be on Thursday, the
April
12th. April 12th, which is a Thursday. So people can't come to the breakfast, but there's lots of ways that people who are inspired to help with this can get engaged with Shelter House. So tell us what some of those things might be.
Sure. So as you mentioned, this is the first year that we sold out so early. There's going to be over 300 people in that room, from individuals to business owners to our faith leaders, boards of supervisors. There's going to be delegates, just a wide array of people. And we're going to have 2 courageous individuals who are in our programs right now get up and talk in front of these 300 strangers about their journey of how they became homeless or how they became victims of domestic violence and where they are now. And as you mentioned, yes, it's sold out. If you would still like to come, you can get on a waiting list in case there are people that back out. So I do encourage you to do that at shelterhouse.org. Or you can contact us at info@shelterhouse.org. But there's also ways that you can still contribute. And as this is a benefit breakfast, we are going to be making an ask at the end, and that is a financial contribution. So if you're interested in making a financial contribution, there's always the opportunity to do that at any time. Our website's always up to make that financial contribution. And you can do it as a reference to our breakfast or at any time. So I do encourage, and it does take those financial contributions and resources in order for us to operate an organization like we have. So it's extremely important. There's a lot of other ways to get involved also. We already talked about
some of the collaborative
things, such as people, groups coming in and doing things within our shelters. Groups or individuals can do drives for us. We have Girl Scouts that go out and do coat drives or food drives. One of the big needs that we always have are diapers and wipes, feminine hygiene products.
Yes,
something
and
I
should step right in here and mention bras because I'm like this with Holly Siebold.
Yep.
And Bras is bringing resources and aid to women's shelters, which is exactly how Bras got started 4 years ago, was to meet that specific need. That's another fantastic collaborative suggestion. So working with Bras means you're also working to provide these things to Shelter House.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways. If this is a platform here, and Catherine, you've given me the platform to just raise the issue of this. So if there are ways, or if there's things that individuals that are watching, where their expertise is or what their interest is, we're looking for win-wins. We're not looking for people just to come in and say, hey, what do you need? We want to know what's going to fulfill you also. We want to know what your expertise is, so that this can be a win-win for both our organization and the families that we serve, but also the people within our community.
Well, you talked about your landlord network, which I had no idea about, which makes complete sense. But, in addition to housing first, that means getting people as quickly as possible into their own home, they need a job, and they need a job that pays a living wage. So what is the possibility of creating a jobs network with people who own businesses and who are open to the idea that they can employ a hardworking person who's dedicated and highly motivated to put that other piece together with the house and the job?
So as you mentioned, housing first is housing first. We need stabilization, of course. And the only way to do that is through employment. We have in our shelters part-time right now, because that's all the funding that we have and all the resources that we have through grants. we employ part-time employment specialists in our shelters that are working with individuals to just develop a resume and give them job leads. As the 10-year plan is ending, now I've mentioned about affordable housing and what our effort is towards affordable housing. Workforce development is another very key priority of ours within the homeless sector, to make sure that we're addressing that, making sure that we're addressing workforce development, making sure that we know that businesses understand the impact of homelessness and domestic violence in our community and seeing what they can do. One of the speakers at our breakfast, you'll hear that she's homeless and her family's homeless. She's actually a grandmother who is homeless due to a medical condition that it left her unable to work. And she wasn't able to get disability. So she is now working very, very part-time for a school as a substitute teacher. And she used to work on Fort Belvoir, and now she's not able to do that. She used to work for a nice company. She's a college degree, but again, she can't get full-time employment. So we're trying to link her with those, with those opportunities, but it's extremely hard.
I know it is.
Here, yes, she has a college degree, she has a good work history, but she has a medical condition. She's also, not at the beginning of her career,
right.
So that's, that's hard. But we need landlords to understand our population, and also as we need landlords to take a risk, or we need landlords to be willing to be part of the solution, we also have to have our businesses and the private sector understand that they can also be part of this solution. And it's not so much taking a risk, it's just, it's having that empathy, having that sympathy, and understanding the population, that the people that are coming into our programs have just as much value as other people that we are hiring out there.
And the fact of the matter is just like people to help them find housing, you've got people who are in fact coaching them on their resume and job interview skills. And you've got a collaboration with somebody to help people dress for an interview and how to present themselves. So you've got a lot of coaching going on, and you're working with other organizations who are trying to help with the skills part. Yeah. But somebody with all the skills in the world isn't going to move forward unless you have people who have jobs saying, I've got something for you. One of the things that I have to tell you worries me is the closure of these Toys R Us stores.
Yeah.
Whenever I see something huge like that, like Toys R Us is closing, I'm thinking, how many people depend on that to stay where they are? I mean, the ripple effect. Now the job market has to absorb these people. Now housing, they're not going to be able to afford to live where they're living. It's people truly have to understand that as a community, we have got to figure out how to meet all of the needs.
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is impacting everybody. It's a struggle for me sometimes when I'm trying to raise awareness about domestic violence and about homelessness, of how this is really impacting others. And it really is. It's impacting our entire community. As you said, the ripple down effect of, the ripple effect of Toys R Us closing and things like that, that's having a major impact. That may not impact my job specifically, but that's having a major impact on our community. We have to have a better understanding and not necessarily just turn around and say, oh, I'm sorry for those poor people, because sorry for those poor people, now they need jobs. And now our kids, that are growing up and needing jobs, it really is in some way, shape, or form not helping our community thrive as we really want it to be. And that's why we all have to get involved. We talked about the 1 in 4 with victims of domestic violence and how that's impacting our community and how it's impacting jobs. It really is. I mean, there are a lot of people out there right now that need our support.
Well, and again, I think this is helping people to understand that there's a different lens through which we need to be looking at these issues. And having the community absorb when there are major layoffs like that, it also affects the kids in school. Yeah. I mean, how children are being traumatized in the classroom right now, and there are so many ways they're being traumatized in the classroom now. Everything from active shooter drills to their classmates living under the threat of deportation to their parents' job loss. You think about the average 5 to 12-year-old and what they deal with just going to school and having all these things play out among their friends. I don't think any of us are really wrapping our minds around how this is going to impact these kids long term.
Yeah. Yeah, it's concerning, and those are the kind of the mainstream issues that we're all facing as a community. And then, as we talked about, you know, adding the status of being homeless and not being able to, you know, go to your own home and having to come back to a shelter, or being cabbed from, you know, Alexandria to school the whole way back to Fairfax for, you know, to and from school. It is traumatizing. It's you know, we try to put services in place, and we're doing the absolute best we can to make sure that the children are stable, but it is traumatizing. And we just have to keep rallying. We have to start understanding the issue. We have to keep getting involved. You know, if a lot of the times ignorance is, you know, it's kept me from wanting to get involved in a lot of things, right?
People
if I don't know.
People don't know what they don't know. So I'm trying to cut people a break. Like, just because I know it doesn't mean everybody knows it. So maybe you don't know what you don't know. So maybe now is a time for us to figure out how we can be part of a solution for a problem we never really thought that carefully about.
Absolutely.
So one of the things people can do is understand how their government works. So every year there are like public hearings around the budget in Fairfax County, where a lot of nonprofits line up to talk about why they shouldn't cut things that affect human services and why more money is needed in order to fund meeting the need, the current need. One of the things that I like to point out to the Board of Supervisors is for every $1 they give to Bright Paths, we're raising like $5 or $10. Like, so it's an investment, it's seed money.
That's right.
And so I know that this is part of this breakfast, and what you're doing on the 12th is trying to help people understand the many ways they can help, and one of them is going in front of the Board of Supervisors.
Absolutely, and that's part of the advocacy and education. I talk to the boards of supervisors on a regular basis. The majority of them know my name. So when I get up in front of the boards of supervisors, they know what I'm going to say already. But really, when a constituent within their district, and they hear from them, a regular unpaid voter who is taking this issue very serious and understanding it, and voicing that we need to do something about this. Not from a complaining standpoint, but from a concern standpoint.
And an empathy standpoint. Like, let me tell you my story so you can understand what the need is and how it needs to be met. And so I want to just say that's one of the reasons that you were the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leader in 2016. I was there, I remember it well. And last year in 2017, Shelter House was the Nonprofit of the Year for the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And I think it's clear to everybody watching as to the fact that your leadership and the way Shelter House has grown and established the merit of the services is one of the reasons that you have been recognized here in Fairfax County. So I will say congratulations on both counts.
Well, thank you very much. And the visibility really from an organizational standpoint is extremely important. And that's really, what I feel like is really the most important. Yes, it's great recognition for, I think, that our enterprise is growing and doing great work. And we have, I say all the time that, the biggest asset that we have as an enterprise is our staff. We have very passionate, very dedicated staff.
Well, people have a chance to meet them or to engage. And that is one of the things that I want to say thank you, Joe, so much for being here. You have an opportunity to help Shelter House and the work that they do here in Fairfax County. Engage, go to their website, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And join us next time for Inside Scoop.